I could do this. Hi, everybody. It's me again. This is What's Left of Fran Lewis. And we have Stephen Manchester here. And I have the book, You Will Be Peter. And there are a whole bunch of people that are waiting for me to get rid of him, hand him over. So this was so interesting. And when I told it to my nephew, because his new girlfriend wants to read it, which made me happy. It's great. So, how did you
Nice.
decide to rate the life of Peter as related to Jesus? And what research did you guys do?
So my co-author Jerry Lathan actually reached out to me through my publisher. He was looking for an author who could, you know, spin a tale that evoked emotion, right? So we ended up getting together down in Alabama, in Mobile, Alabama, and actually storyboarded the entire book in Chatham. But he had been doing research for years, so this was his vision, his passion. He brought me on, Fran, to do the writing of the book. And even research that he had done, he and I ended up doing months and months of research before we ever pen to paper. So it was very interesting. Like the most for us was to get the timeline accurate, um, which I think we absolutely did because we ended up vetting the book with pastors and reverends and priests and wrong with the biblical timeline.
I did some research too, by the way. I wanted to know who Peter was. I wanted to have an idea about
Good.
Jesus. I did look it up. Yeah, you know me. I said this is really interesting because I
Yeah,
never read stuff like that
absolutely.
with growing up. Yeah, I did. I said I was
Yeah.
mesmerized. So, but I know who Messiah is because we do believe in that. But tell us about Peter the fisherman and how he learns about the Messiah. And wait till everybody gets to know Peter.
Yeah, so Peter came from a village called Bethsaida, right? So Peter's brother is actually Andrew, one of the 12 apostles. His best friend is John, or was John, right?
Yeah.
Also the apostle, whose brother is James, right? So when you look at the four of them, that's truly the fellowship, right? So when the book starts, they're in Capernaum, which is a fishing village on the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah, but yeah.
And at the time they were looking for everybody was looking for the Messiah or waiting for the Messiah to arrive, right? So
Mm-hmm.
obviously John the Baptist was preaching, saying that he's coming, and John, the Baptist was making the way for him. Um, so Andrew specifically is the one that found him on the Jordan River, and then really ran home to tell his brother Peter, we have found the Messiah. And the interesting part was they really truly believed at the time that Jesus or the Christ or the Messiah would be a military leader who would come into the world to overthrow their oppressors, the Romans.
Mm.
And obviously, we all know from history that it didn't happen that way.
I don't think people realize that Jesus was defined his role as a rabbi. I don't think
Right.
many people I know. And how would you explain what he's able to do? I mean, he was so charismatic that people followed him.
Yes.
And I know Peter was like transfixed on him. It was almost as
Yes.
if he gave up his whole yeah. So why was he so and I get the feeling that if you didn't do the right thing, he wasn't going to keep you.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I got
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's I got to tell you. So Christ, the way that Peter saw him was almost the way a child, right, would have faith, right, in Santa Claus. Like it was. And I think that's truly the reason that Christ picked him, and then it made him the cornerstone of the early Christian church because Peter believed. He believed beyond belief, even when he didn't understand. He believed. I mean, the whole time for 3.5 years of the ministry of Christ, he was preaching love, right? And they were waiting. They were literally waiting for this overthrow of the Roman government, right, and the oppressors of Jerusalem and Judea. So um, I love that for most of the book and all the research that we did, Peter honestly didn't get it. He kind of didn't get it, right? But he hung in there with him, and he wanted he hung in there, and he wanted to follow him no matter what happened.
Ah, good. I'm just making sure because we're live on YouTube.
Yeah,
They
good.
yeah they sent me an email, and if they don't send me when I panic right away. So tell us what changes Simon. What were the words, and yet he was unsure of what they meant.
Yeah, so I think he was. I mean, if you think about the first time that Simon met
Yeah,
Jesus, right? Again, it was on the
yeah,
banks of
Jesus,
the Jordan
yeah,
River. Jesus approaches him, says, "You are Simon, you will be Peter," right? Which is obviously the title of the book, and it also bakes in the evolution or the arc of the story, going from kind of heavy-handed, brash fisherman to becoming the cornerstone, right, of the Christian church, right? Somebody who starts to preach the gospels along with the other
hmm
apostles. Um, but again, the thing that fascinated me the most was Peter was not educated. He was not wealthy. He was not
yeah.
somebody of any means, right? But he was a person of great faith in Jesus, right? And continued to follow, regardless whether he understood it or not.
Well, he was transfixed. He will do anything to get ahead and on top.
Yes,
Simon. Yeah,
right.
it's like he wants to some people I don't like or no. So why did they go to Jesus? And what was John? John was an apostle for him, right? But he
Yes,
was
he
he the
was.
number one? So
Well, I
Simon,
think Peter was picked first, but John
yeah,
continued to call himself, Jesus' beloved,
yeah.
right? So John was very, very close to Jesus.
He seems to feel that he should be the one in charge of what happens to Jesus. Why?
Right.
So how would he do? Would he define his own role as the
I
number one
think for
apostle?
Yeah, I think for John, and not John the Baptist, but John the Apostle, right? He was chosen when Jesus overflowed the boat with fish, right? To prove that
Yeah,
Peter and Andrew had gone out that morning on the Sea of Galilee. They caught nothing. That's overboard, and the boat is almost capsizes from the amount of fish that's loaded onto it. John and James are also there with their father Zebedee, right? So they witnessed this. So at the time, when they all come into dock and they bank the boats and they start to unload the boats, Peter falls to Jesus feet, right? He goes to his knees and he says, "I'm unworthy," and so on, but he basically tells them, "Follow me, I'll make you fishers of men," and then turns to John and James in
hmm,
front of their
yeah.
father and says to them, "Follow me." So right then and there, Peter was chosen first, then Andrew, and then John and James. So the four of them, essentially at the same time, were chosen as his first four apostles of the 12.
But he wanted to be the one on top. That's what was scary. So
Yeah,
this is the
I
this
think Peter was chosen, right? But the funny thing that
chose a different. Yeah,
John was much more intelligent. John was the one who wrote,
I love John.
obviously the
Yeah, I like
gospel,
John.
right?
Now
Yeah, me
this is
too.
what I could use some help from Jesus and anybody, some miracles.
Yeah,
Everybody, I could use, yeah, for myself and a few other people. So how did he create the miracles, and how did he perform them, and how did he just choose what kind to perform?
yeah. Well. I mean, I don't know if I can answer that. I do know that the first public miracle that he performed
Yeah,
was at the wedding at Cana, right, where he turned 6 stone jars of water into
yeah,
wine. And everybody witnessed this, and that was just the start of it, right? For him to come out and basically say, I am the Messiah. Publicly, I am the Messiah, right? Through me is how you get to the Father, right? So, and then he continued from there to heal people and to perform miracles, right? To prove that, he was the Messiah. I mean, he raised the man from the dead, right? So, and the entire time the apostles are with him, watching him, and he's teaching in parables, and they don't understand a lot of it. But the whole deal was, to your earlier point, people think, oh, these were Christians. They were Jews. All these men were Jews, right? Following a radical rabbi
mm-hmm.
who ended up forming Christianity.
It's amazing. Where,
Yeah,
how, tell us, now this was really, really amazing. The way Simon's wife reacted and didn't tell him not to go. I don't think very many people would be like
yeah,
that, but then maybe she had her own reasons and she knew he was going to go anyway.
yeah,
So how come she
right.
supported him so greatly?
Because I think they were all looking for the Messiah, right? So she had to believe that
Yeah,
Christ or Jesus was the Messiah. And I will say this too, Fran, right? When you look at the timeline, it was actually brilliant the way that it unfolded, right?
yeah,
Because I would think the same thing. Like,
yeah.
I'm married to a very understanding woman, but if I say to her, "Listen, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to hit the road for 3 or 4 years," right? I'm not sure she'd understand, right? Um, but after Christ fills the boat with fish and tells the four, Capernaum fishermen, Peter, Andrew, John, and James, to follow him, somebody runs on the beach and says Ema, who was, Peter's mother-in-law, so it would have been his wife's mother, was ill with fever and she was dying. And they go up to the house and Jesus heals her and she gets out of bed. So her daughter saw this, right? So she turns to her husband and says, you have to, he's the Messiah, right? So you have to go. And she was all in from there. And they reused her as a character. She's mentioned twice in the Bible and she's unnamed.
Mhm.
So in You Will Be Peter, our novel, again, this is a novel, she remains unnamed. I don't give her a name, Jerry and I don't give her a name in the book, but she's used as a character. But every time the Bible says that they went back to Capernaum or they went back home, he starts to unpack everything with his wife, Peter does, right? And it just adds to the story.
So now we have Matthew. And he's not honest. And how does that change? Yeah. I mean, it had to be some kind of conflict. Everything couldn't be perfect. I know. I don't like him at all.
No, and I don't think the apostles did either. By all stretches of the imagination, right? Like when, and I think it's coined up the best way, right? That Peter said, listen, the Romans were born Romans. They're dogs, right? But they were born Romans. Peter was born a Jew and betrayed his people by becoming a tax collector working for the Romans. So they hated him. They absolutely despised him. I mean, these people were crushed, with taxation, right, on both sides, from the Romans as well as the Jews and the Pharisees. So they absolutely hated Matthew. But I think that was part of the lesson too, right? That Jesus was trying to teach them, like, all people are welcome in the kingdom, right? And he has this man follow him who by all accounts, Matthew is the other four Gospels, right?
Well, it must have been hard for Jesus. Jesus had to decide who were the 12 apostles and how were they picked. He didn't just pick them randomly.
Yeah. No, he didn't. So they were with him for many, many weeks. And at Caesarea Philippi is when he chose the 12 apostles. And again, they represent the 12 tribes of Israel, right? So they were with him, right? And Christ went off, and the first person he picked was Peter. He was the first apostle named. And from there, they he went through the rest of them. But for the most part, a lot of people don't realize this. He had a fairly large following that walked with him, right? So there were disciples, to include many women, his mother, even John and James' mother. I mean, Mary and Martha of Bethany. There were a lot of female disciples, but he chose 12 men to become, his apostles, which were that was the main troop.
That's nothing, just a pharmacy. They could wait. I don't know what they want.
Yeah.
I don't know what they want. I don't even want to know. So this is a character that people know about.
Right.
This is somebody who knows Judah, and he was evil, and you can't trust him. So how did you create the scenes with him, and how did he become part of this whole thing? And that's scary.
Yeah. So Judas, in my opinion, was, obviously he's the villain, right, in the entire story. But Jesus picks him as an apostle, chooses him as an apostle, obviously knowing that he's going to be betrayed by Judas. But Judas plays the role I believe he was born to play, right, because of his greed and because, again, he was waiting for Jesus to step forward and crush the Romans, and Jesus wasn't doing it. And there are some scholars, biblical scholars or theologians, that believe that Judas was trying to test, go to apprehend him in the garden. And there was some expectation that throw the Romans down, right? He could have easily, called on a legion of angels, right, and smited the enemy, but he didn't do that, right? So for 30 pieces of silver, right, Judas ends up hanging himself later, right, knowing that he had betrayed Jesus.
Now, why were the Romans so powerful? And then we have to decide how to become Christian.
Yeah, Judea at the time was almost like a backwater. I think if you were Pontius Pilate, who was the governor, right, and obviously the chief enforcer and henchman, the Roman Empire had taken over a lot of land, right, everywhere, and throughout the world.
Yeah, I know.
They would put somebody in charge really to collect taxes. But they also built roads and they did, aqueducts. There was some things that they put in place, but for the most part, they went in and just collected, right? So they would take their natural resources, they would take their food, and they would feed their army with it. But a lot, most of it was the taxation, right? So in Judea at the time, again, it was considered backorder, and I would think anybody who was
Mm.
assigned there as a Roman would have considered that post a punishment, right? Because you were far away from Rome and all the luxuries of Rome. They were living in almost a third world country.
So tell me, how come they decided? Why did they declare Jesus no good? Why did they decide that they were gonna? They put him on trial, and then they
Right.
decided to crucify him. And that's when I cried in the book all the whole
Yeah.
chapter.
So
Didn't
it
really
was the
understand
Pharisees.
why.
It was the Jewish elite, right? It wasn't even the Romans. It was the Jewish elite. It was the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin. And the main or the high priest's name was Caiaphas, right? So Caiaphas
Yeah.
had power over all of Jerusalem, right? So
Hmm.
3 major festivals a year, he headed all of them up, right? Passover, festival of the tent, threatened by Jesus because Jesus was drawing bigger crowds. He had power, and basically what Jesus was saying was, I can tear down this temple, or you can tear down this temple, and I'll rebuild it. And they were thinking physically; they weren't thinking that, as the Messiah, he's declaring himself the Son of God, right? So he came in earthly form, and
Yeah.
the Romans oppressed. Like the Romans were in charge of everything, but Jesus, I don't think the expectation of him being who he was, or him preaching love and turning the other cheek and all this, they had a really, really difficult time with that, right? So it really was the threat to power. He was a threat to power. And at the time, he wasn't the only rabbi claiming to be the Messiah, right? But because of his miracles, because of the wonders that he created, it was really the Jewish elite that found him to be a threat and then put the Roman dogs on him, is what they did.
It's too bad that he's not a real person.
Yeah.
That he's a real, but yeah, I know because he's so revered by so many. And then when you look at him, I did at my nephew's service 2 weeks ago, and you see the statue of him, the cross of him, and then you cry because you feel bad that
Yeah.
that shouldn't happen.
Right.
So the character, I love Mary. I love Mary, and I love Irma. How did they come into his life? How can you
So
not
Mary
love
Magdalene, are
Mary?
you talking about Mary Magdalene? Or is it Mary Magdalene?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So Mary Magdalene, I believe, is probably, and again, there were the 12 male apostles, right? But Mary Magdalene was
Uh-huh.
probably one of the closest disciples to Jesus. And when you think about it, she mentions that she was healed of 7 demons, right? So again, in modern day, a lot of theologians or biblical scholars would say that demons were mental health issues, right? So it could have been schizophrenia, it could have been
Mhm.
bipolarism, could have been a bunch of different things that Jesus had healed her. And then suddenly she shows up and they're walking through a village or a town, and she shows up and falls to his feet, right, and starts to wash his feet and dry them, with her hair,
Mhm.
and then she follows him the whole way. There are historians who believe that Mary Magdalene was a woman of means, right? So she may have owned
Mhm.
property, or she had, money, and she helped to fund the ministry um, of Christ, right, over the 3.5 years. I mean, they had to have some money, right, to be able to eat and, use, have the things that they needed to survive. So I love Mary Magdalene, right, because Jesus appears to her. The
Mhm.
first person he appears to upon the resurrection is her. She is there at the foot of the cross. She walks with him when he goes to the Hill of Skulls, right, to be crucified. So she's with him every step of the way. And I love her character because she shows intestinal fortitude when some of the, and I'm not judging them obviously for this, but when Christ was apprehended in the garden, he was taken to Caiaphas for that mock trial, right, to be sentenced to death. Mary Magdalene was with him. She never left. She never left him. And the other apostles got scattered and went back to the safe house where the Last Supper was held.
That's really amazing. So Peter was told that he failed Jesus, and why? Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Yeah, he was. I mean, he
became
was a
so powerful.
self-proclaimed.
I think he wanted to take Jesus' place.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. I think what happened was he thought that he basically said, "I would never betray you," and Christ said,
Yeah, I know. That's not
during the
true.
Last Supper. Yeah, well, before this, the cock crows three times before sunrise, right? You will
Yeah.
betray me three times. And he does, right? Because he's human and because he fears. But the entire time, by all accounts, he was kind of a self-proclaimed security guard, right? Like he's the one who thought he was there to protect Jesus. And then when the time came, he couldn't do it, and Jesus predicted that. But what I love about that story, friend, right, is he tells him three times that you will betray me three times. And then when he appears to them upon the resurrection, he asks him three times, "Do you love me?" And he forgives him, right? He forgives him for having done it.
Now, this is a question I'm going to ask. How did they really know that he came back, he resurrected?
He
How did they
appeared,
know it really? People
yeah, he
saw it?
appeared before them. So he appeared. So obviously Mary Magdalene and Mary and all the, they call them all the Marys, right? But there was Mary Magdalene, Mary of Bethany, Mary, the Virgin Mother. They're down at the tomb, getting ready to, because they had already anointed him and they put him in the tomb, and the stone was rolled back. The Roman guard was gone, and Jesus was gone, and the shroud was there. And then at one point, she hears somebody talking to her, and she turns around and he says, "Woman, why do you weep?" And then she realizes it's Jesus, and he tells her, "Go back and tell Peter and my brothers that I'm going to my Father, right? And I will, I'll be back." And he basically comes back and reappears to them in the safe house. And this is the same, scene where Thomas doesn't believe, and he tells Thomas to, look at his hands, and if he wants to put his finger in the holes right in his hands. So, and that's why we get the term doubting Thomas, right? But he appeared to them multiple times before he finally ascended into heaven.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people wish that he could do that right now.
Mm,
In their
yeah.
own way, sometimes they do, yeah.
Yeah.
I know
I
people
agree.
that actually think that they see him.
Yeah. We're living in difficult times. I have no doubt about that.
Now, yeah,
Yeah.
it's horrible. Before I forget, after the 29th of after next week, I'm taking time off. I think it's about time I did. The
Good for
25th,
you.
I have the number one horror writer of America, Vincent Zandri, Terminal
Wow.
Moonlight. And on
Yeah.
the 27th, this is something everybody will appreciate. I had a sound problem last week and I had to cancel the show. I was in tears. The microphones got off.
Yeah.
The person that's coming on the 27th is Michael B. Butler, who spoke at the 50th anniversary of D-Day. He was
Wow.
asked to speak because his family, and I'm honored because he draws me over everybody else, which is
Wow.
amazing.
That's
On
awesome.
September 15th, Cindy McDonald. On the 17th, The Weirdest Person. Six will hold the casket and one will say the mass, and that's all I'll say about that. On the 28th, Eleanor Kearns. And then after that, we've got a six in October and three coming in November with Philip Waterland.
Wow. You're busy.
Yeah, too busy. Yeah, it's very popular. What can I say? I walked
Good for you.
into a pharmacy yesterday and I told the manager what I do. He not only did he treat me, he treated me to some nail polish and walked around the whole time as if I was some kind of movie star.
You're a
He said,
celebrity.
"Oh my God, yeah."
I love it.
So, how did you create his exact words? At times, I felt Jesus was actually talking to me.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I was at a book signing about
Yeah,
6 months ago, maybe a little bit more, and a woman had walked up to me and said she was on the second reading of the book. She'd already read through it once and she was reading it again. And she said about a third of the way through the book, Jesus is talking to Peter. And
yeah,
she says, but it didn't feel like he was talking to Peter. It felt like he was talking to me, right? And the chapter had ended where Jesus turns to his left and looks at Peter and smiles. And she said, Peter, Jesus didn't smile at Peter, he smiled at me, which is exactly why we wrote this book, to make the reader feel like you were standing with them, that
yeah.
you were walking with them, and that you could feel the entire
That's
experience.
great.
Yeah.
I know because he was telling Peter how he failed him,
Yeah.
and he deserved that.
Yeah.
So, who were the 12 apostles, and what does Jesus expect of him?
Well, the four, I will say this rather than going through the whole litany, but the four is what I talked about. And I really focused, Jerry and I during the book focused on Peter and Andrew, John and James. There was a second James. There was, Philip,
Oh,
Thomas, it
Jacob.
goes on, right? So those 12 apostles were chosen, and for the most part, they were all laymen, right? So there was one singer, there were, a couple carpenters, there were obviously fishermen. They were selected again to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. But at the time, they had been following Jesus for a while, and they were witnessing everything that was going on. Um, so he chose them really to go out into the world and to spread his gospel, the word of Christ, right? And which was their primary mission.
This really got me after what Peter did. How does he rise up and spend time with Peter? And then Peter creates his own ministry.
Right.
That was like, oh my God, I just hope he picks the right people.
Yeah.
I know.
Right.
Why did he decide to trust him like that?
Yeah. I got to tell you, even though he told him you'll betray me 3 times, right? I mean, obviously
Yeah,
Peter was crushed by that. And then when he appears to him, I believe, right, there was nothing coincidental. There was nothing that happened that Jesus didn't know was going to happen, right?
I know.
But he was also trying to strengthen him, right? So when you look at the arc or the character development of the story, I love Peter, right? Because for the most part, he was kind of a buffoon. He didn't understand what was going on, but he kept following him, right? And really, a lot of people don't know this, friend. In the Bible, Jesus calls him Simon 30 times, and he
Yeah,
calls him Peter 30 times. Every time Simon gets something wrong, Jesus calls him Simon. Every time he gets something right, he calls him Peter. So it's really almost the growth of a character, right? And saying, listen, this is who you are. You are Simon. You will be Peter. So as long as you follow me and listen to me, I'll get you to a place where you can lead my people. And that's really what it was about.
I know. It's like, I couldn't put this book down,
Thank
all
you. I
400
appreciate that.
pages. So, who were the members and how did you create, who was the leper? Who was he?
The Bible doesn't say a whole lot about him. The leper just appears on the road, and the apostles
Yeah,
try to stop Jesus from going near him, right? Because obviously at the time it was a contagion, right? So, but Jesus heals him because the man had faith, and then he's made whole again, right? So everybody sees this. Obviously, the word spreads throughout Judea and Samaria. So there were just so many miracles. I mean, Jerry and I used a lot of them, but clearly we didn't use all of them.
my favorite chapter. I'll have to add it. So, what happens after he puts leaves down?
After he does what?
Puts leaves down.
Yeah, so the palm. So obviously they come into Jerusalem for the last time. This is Palm Sunday, so they come in on Sunday, and this is today would be considered the Holy Week. But
Mm,
he comes in on a donkey, right? Which the prophets had predicted he was gonna do. And the children are singing, and they're laying palm leaves at his feet, and he knows that he's coming in to be sentenced to death and crucified. And that's really, I mean, you think
yeah,
about from the Last Supper to the Garden of
that's what he
Gethsemane.
said. Yeah,
Like I can't even imagine, what they were because I don't think the apostles even then knew, even though he had told them they're going to make me suffer and they will kill me, right? You'll be alone soon. I still don't think they believed him. I still think that they were just following him. And then suddenly all this stuff happened because they had seen all the miracles. They saw all the power that Jesus had and believed that he could stop anything at any time. What they didn't realize was this was all intentional, right? This was God saying, hey, I'm giving you my son, right? So if you believe in him, then it washes away your sins as well. So he literally becomes the lamb who sacrificed for everybody.
I really wish he would come alive. It's really funny because I won't say what, I had some tests done yesterday,
Yeah,
and I was talking to God, and I said, all I needed to hear is one word, negative.
right.
That's all I needed. And I got the test back this morning. All four things were negative, and I said, "Thank you, God, yay!"
Amen. Good for you.
It
I'm
was
glad to
it
hear
was
that.
it was it was a big deal. My next door neighbor is not going to be around much longer. Whatever reason, she's really sick, but she
Mm.
had something, and we all had to make sure that we didn't have it.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah,
Oh,
3 times was no fun. Yeah,
no.
so thank God she's all right. And I looked at God. I go, you see, I deserved a good miracle.
Right, right. Good for you. That's great news.
Yep. The final chapter, I am Peter. What message would you hope the readers come away one about from Peter? That
I
Peter
think
could
for
talk to
Peter,
them.
it's yeah, like you can mess up 1,000 times, right? But I think the whole
Yeah.
message was, Jesus telling him, keep your eyes on me, don't lose faith in me, and if you follow me, you're okay, right? If you believe in me, you're okay. It's nothing that you can do, it's nothing that you can
Uh
say,
huh.
it's just the belief in me, right, which is going to save you, right, and bring you into the afterlife.
How is this book being received by people? I mean,
I think
because to
very
me,
well. I mean, some
it
people
was
have
all
had problems.
strange to me.
What's that?
It was all strange to me, and I was glad I read it
Yeah.
because I learned a lot.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's different from the other stuff that I've written in the past, but I'm so happy that we did it. It was a joy to collaborate with this gentleman, right? And we're looking at doing a future book together, which I'm excited about. So I think for the most part, people have received it very well, right? Because the Bible is difficult to
Yeah.
translate, and so what we did is we took it. I mean, we put it in story form, and then we fictionalized it only in the sense that
Yeah.
if the gospel's the gospel, right? So if Jesus said it, he said it. If he did it, he did it. We didn't change a word. But there were conversations that happened amongst the apostles. It was about bringing people into Judea 2,000 years ago. What did they eat? How did they brush their teeth? What did it feel like? You know what I mean? So we created this entire environment and then put the reader there. And then you're walking along. Really, the whole idea was, to take a walk with Jesus for those 3.5 years.
I think there are a lot of people that would love to still take a walk with Jesus.
Amen to that.
Jewish or not Jewish, it doesn't
Right.
matter.
I agree.
We don't
I
have
agree.
anybody that's that powerful as a rabbi at
Right.
all. They're
Right.
all basically into their own thing and donations.
Yeah. Right.
I learned a lot. My grandfather was a very powerful man in the UJA, and then he ran the Bronx Jewish Center and other temples.
Oh
So when
wow.
my grandfather spoke, everybody listened.
Everybody listen.
I
Wow.
learned that. I learned. That's why I take care of all the things for him.
Yeah.
So
Good.
what's next for both of you?
Well, we're talking about doing John, right? So,
Oh,
the story
nice.
would, yeah, the story would start earlier, right? Than Peter's story started, right? And it would end much later because John actually outlives all of them. Um, so I'm excited. I'm excited to dive into that. We've already done a lot of research. I expect over the next month or two, he and I will start working on that. Um, so yeah, and that'll take us literally a year, to get that done. We're hoping to get it done sooner than that, but this type of work, there's so much research, there's so much, meticulous detail in it. And then in the end, you want it to read like, somebody's telling you a story on a front porch. I mean, that's really the whole deal. But all the information that backs that up is very
The
tangible.
research was interesting, but I didn't get bored with the research.
Good, good.
I read a lot of books. Like I read
Mm.
like 10 last week, even though my eyes are not supposed to do that.
Wow.
I
Good.
do. And sometimes I read something and I look up the research and I know it's not true.
Right,
That's when I don't read the book.
right, right.
I think in 15 years there were three, but last 2 weeks ago, I got a book. I won't say the title of it,
Hmm.
but the premise of the book was not mercy killing, was if you reach a certain age, we choose a group of people, we choose one person to sacrifice their life and die.
Wow.
So, yeah. And these people know it, and I couldn't read it.
Right. I don't blame you. Yeah, that wouldn't
I
be for
couldn't read it. It
me.
was the first time I said to the publisher, I'm not doing it. So, where can everybody find out about you guys and your work?
So you can go to youwillbepeter.com. That's our landing page. We're obviously on Amazon as well. I'm on Facebook, so feel free to
We
friend me
know.
or reach out. Yeah. Um, so obviously, we've done a lot of promotions, Fran. I've done a lot of book signings for this. I've been to churches and stood up in pulpits and talked about it. And Jerry's done the same. So Jerry's from Alabama. I'm from Massachusetts. So we're covering the North and the South. Um, but it's been exciting, and I'm really excited to see what comes next, and especially with a book like John. I mean, John, if I'm being honest, is probably my favorite apostle, right? I mean, I love
I
Peter too,
liked
but
him also, yeah.
yeah. So
Well, this
we'll see. And John was also again one of the authors of the Gospels, right? So he was writing a lot of this down.
is Peter going to be in this one too, or
Oh
just
yeah,
John?
yeah.
Oh,
Peter will be.
good. That should be
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, and John and Peter are best friends, right? So Peter has to be there for sure.
Well, this is going to go, it's, I mean, in the stream, yeah, this is going to go to YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, X,
Wonderful.
FaceTime, and wherever else you and TikTok,
Yes. Wow.
wherever you want it to go. And I'll send you the
I
video.
like. Please
Hopefully, it
do.
got
Yes.
taped the right way,
Yeah.
and you can put it wherever you want. I'm going to put it on Facebook so
Yes.
everybody knows I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Listen, I really appreciate this. I always
That's
love talking to
okay.
you, friend.
This is takes my mind off of a lot of things.
Good.
A lot
Good.
of yeah.
Well,
My
thank you
best
for
friend
doing it,
has
right? I mean, as an author,
yeah.
I know what you do for all of us authors, so thank you for that. Truly.
Well, you appreciate me, but there are some people that I just don't say anything anymore. Well, if you notice, there are a lot of people on Facebook whose books I reviewed. They have new releases out, and I haven't asked to read them.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah,
I won't. But there were like a whole bunch of publishers that Peter James and I got Tess Gerritsen
yeah,
and DP. I got everybody.
yeah.
But when I got Philip Margolin sent me the email today, I'm going to
Yeah,
ask him to send. I just did the questions. False witness. You got to read it. It's fantastic.
good. I will do that. And when you talk to Vincent Zandri, please tell him I said hi.
I will. Vincent, I just hope he's well enough to do it because he's been whatever. He's my favorite person because we
Yeah,
crack up together, but you
yeah.
never know what words are going to come out of his mouth.
Right. He's a good guy for sure, but please send him my
I
best.
know. Terminal Moonlight, you got to read it.
Yeah.
Everybody, let me